So to some degree, if you live consciously and the practice of manifestation techniques could be, but doesn't have to be, a small part of it or larger part of it. Living consciously will greatly enhance the quality of your life, make relationships more harmonious, probably also your body will function better, and you activate certain powers that can be very helpful. You may find that helpful things happen once you are committed to a certain course of action, wanting to create this or that, and you perhaps speak those words to empower your manifestation, take corresponding action. Don't go into negative reaction when obstacles appear. Then something happens that goes beyond the things that you yourself do and initiate, which is the action, the words, and so on. Something from in the universal consciousness comes to help you and this happens sometimes through just the right thing happening at the right moment, just the right person appearing to solve a problem, synchronistic events. These tend to happen quite a bit, not to mention, we had it earlier on, we talked about it, not to mention touching an energy stream that is powerful, but you initiated it, you created it, you had this aim, you took correct action, correct manifestation, words, correct aim, and then suddenly it becomes empowered. There's far more power than you yourself could ever generate. So power that you can, it's a little bit like, it can happen, but it doesn't have to happen. When it happens, fine, be grateful, but it may not happen, or it may. It's like riding on a huge wave, like a surfer riding on the crest of a wave. And so these are people who have achieved great things, often have said it's a little bit like that. An energetic wave. Again, that has its own challenges, as I believe we talked about it before. The greatest challenge being if what you do is being supported by a huge influx of energy, bringing about helpful events and so on, and huge amount of reaching countless people that is usually involved. The greatest danger there is that the ego claims that it did it, and then it'll go to your head, and that will be the beginning of a rapid end. So, but So some people who practice some craft, music, they may be writers, composers. It can happen when you're totally focused and you do it for a long time. These people may never have read any spiritual book or may never have practiced any manifestation techniques or anything like that. So it's not, and yet suddenly what they do becomes incredibly empowered. So that could happen to you, but if it doesn't happen, you can still have a very pleasant life experience by living in a conscious way. And again, remember, not putting undue expectations upon the world. Satisfaction is derived from within you, here and now, the true sense of beingness or presence, and you can do without losing yourself in the doing, because there's always a sense of beingness or presence in the background. Now, it can happen that people who are into spiritual practice and so on develop the erroneous idea that now that they practice manifestation, that they can control every aspect of their life and their life experience. But that's not the case. No matter how great a master you are at conscious living or conscious manifestation, it does not mean that you are in control of every aspect of your life. Life is multidimensional, and no matter what you achieve or do, I sometimes call it the script writer in the sky, who is infinitely inventive, will surprise you, always. Nobody is in total control. There will be unexpected events. There will be unexpected losses. There will be things happening that you can't explain. You will experience the polarities. You cannot escape the polarities. The more you emphasize one polarity, especially if you go to an extreme, let's say you want a life that is, I want total order in my life. I want everything to be ordered. I want all my schedules in order, my relationships with people, my home situation, everything is controlled, and my garden is everything is clipped and looks park-like, and there's order in everything in my life. I'm in total control. I'm the master of the universe. Even your dogs don't misbehave anymore. And then don't be surprised if you take it to one extreme. You will experience, and to some extent you will have contributed to the arising of the opposite extreme, which, of course, the opposite extreme to order is chaos. And you will experience somewhere in your ordered life suddenly the eruption of chaos. And you'll be totally flabbergasted. That wasn't meant to happen. And then you say, I failed in my practice. I need to practice more. No. You were deluded into thinking that everything could be controlled. You can guide your life in the right direction. You are not in control. In many cases, very, very often, what you think is best for you may not be best for you. And if you actually create what you think is best for you, and suddenly it collapses, and maybe only retrospectively you realize that the collapse of that which you thought was best for you was actually a much better thing. You had to experience the collapse in order to go deeper. It brought about a shift in consciousness or deepening in your realization. So don't be a control freak. Don't delude yourself into thinking that you can control the whole thing. Stay in the middle. Life unfolds between the polarities of order and chaos. If you had continuous order only, whether it's in a person's life or in the life of a country, you would create the other polarity, chaos. There have been and there are countries that have such a dictatorial government that there is very little crime and everything seems to be very orderly, and yet usually they don't end well, and usually sooner or later chaos erupts. To eliminate all crime, of course, the government would have to become the criminal, as was the case under National Socialism in Germany. There was relatively little crime compared to now. Of course, the government itself was responsible for the crimes, so and then they didn't need the criminals. North Korea may be a bit similar. Soviet Russia might have been similar. So don't be afraid of some chaos when it does come. You have to experience, and this is not bad. It always means something dissolves and to make room for something new. To be engaged in conscious creation through applied power of human consciousness is something relatively new, although Jesus obviously talked about it, but I don't think many people actually understood for the past 2,000 years what he meant when, for example, when he said, when you pray for something, believe or feel that you have already received it and then it will be given to you. I don't think people really understood what he points to, what that means in your consciousness. But we begin to understand it now. And the ability to create consciously as a co-creator with the universe, because the universe itself creates countless things. How it does that on the unseen, it is very complex. We don't know what happens as the emanation that comes from source brings about the manifold phenomena and life forms in our universe. What is underneath the surface, the energy fields, that create form, and that's the universe. And now humans can now begin to realize that they can also create through application of their mind. They can participate in the creative process. But this cannot be fully realized until or unless the human ego subsides, because the ego is a kind of dysfunction within the human consciousness, the collective consciousness. And as long as the ego is there, the ability of humans to bring about better things through conscious creation is greatly diminished. One thing is for sure, and that is that we are living at a time of crisis, which at the moment looks like a regression, because there's an enormous amount of unconsciousness manifesting in the political situation in many countries, and in the you can see it in the media, the mainstream media. You can see it on the internet. Where this is going, it could be the beginning of a regressive movement. In other words, chaos. The Western countries and some other countries in the East also have lived in relative order since the end of the Second World War, with a few exceptions. Almost excessive order in some countries, where life became just very easy but also empty. Just consumption, pleasure, no depth dimension anymore to life. And so it could well be that a period of collective chaos or disorder will have to be experienced. And if that is the case, it's a necessary prelude to the arising of a new order. But in the meantime, it's important for us to stay conscious even while things enter a state of disorder or chaos, not to get drawn into that, so that we can hold the frequency, so to speak, collectively. We can hold the frequency of presence even while the large part of the world is experiencing disorder or chaos. Be careful with your that you do not absorb unconscious collective thoughts from the media and the internet. It's hard to see how manipulated everything is these days unless you are really careful, and then you believe everything you hear in the news. But what you see in the news is one perspective, and often it is a limited and distorted perspective. I listen to the news every day for a little while because I just want to know what's going on. It's interesting. And I usually listen to news from several countries. If you only listen to news from on one country, you may get a very limited view. You get at least other perspectives on situations. And you can have a certain detachment and stay present and be, if you participate in the discourse that happens, the collective public discourse that happens through countless avenues in the on the internet, online, then really make sure that your communication is an expression of consciousness, that it's conscious, your statements are conscious. It's easy to get drawn into unconsciousness through reactions. You can see how easy it is if people are meeting in one room. There's a meeting, let's say there are 10 people present, and one person is very unconscious, and this one person starts shouting and accusing and so on. It's very easy for one person to pull everybody else to a lower reactive level of consciousness, and before you know it, the whole room erupts. So stay conscious. Affirmations. If you want an affirmation or a manifestation, words to use to remind you, it's not so much manifestation technique or an affirmation, but a pointer that reminds you to be conscious. I recommend something like, this is actually taken from Jesus' words, so that you don't forget who you are. If you forget who you are, obviously you are lost. I am the light of the world. That's a beautiful, I don't know whether to call it an affirmation, but it is a useful reminder or pointer. If you know what it is, what that means, you need to know what that means. And what that means is when Jesus said, there are two quotes I can give you from the Gospels, what Jesus said. He said, "You are the light of the world," and in another Gospel he says, "I am the light of the world." So, you are the light of the world. What does that mean? What is that light? What could that be? Does it mean you're very special? No, because Jesus was talking to very simple people. His disciples were not special, not educated or had social positions. They were simple people. And yet he said to them, "You are the light of the world." So if they were not special, what did he mean? Obviously he meant the light of the world is that which illuminates everything, that which brings everything into existence, one could say, which is consciousness. Imagine this room, or wherever you are, without your consciousness or anybody's consciousness. Is there still a room? Is there still a table? Is there still a ceiling, lights? No, of course not. One could say, well, maybe there's still molecules and atoms floating around, but they don't constitute a table or a chair, or because it needs an organizing, perceiving consciousness that then interprets certain configurations of molecules and atoms in a certain way, and perhaps even creates certain combinations of molecules and atoms. So you are the light of the world means you are the consciousness of the world. That's the essence of who you are. The consciousness of the world emanates from the source of all life in the same way that the light emanates from the sun. So this consciousness emanates from God. God not in the traditional sense, but in a transcendent sense. God not as an imagined big daddy, but the transcendent divine dimension, the intelligence, the inconceivable source of all life that continuously gives rise to, continuously emanates and wants to create. And so we talked about that earlier. So what you sense as your consciousness is not your consciousness, it's the universe's consciousness. And when you can feel yourself as the light of the world, that's your consciousness, is that light that makes your sense perception possible, that makes your thinking possible, that makes your feeling and emotions possible. That is what this consciousness is in Buddhism. It's called the unborn, which means the unmanifested. In other words, it does not exist. It itself doesn't manifest in this world, but something emanates from it that creates the manifestation of the universe. And you are that emanation from the God's emanation. In other words, there is there's a continuity between you and God in the same way that there is a connection, continuity between the light of the sun and the sun. The light of the sun is continuously still in contact with the sun. Or in itself, you couldn't say it is the sun, but it is and it isn't. So you could say I am God, but that would not be quite right. But you are an emanation of God, and the essence of who you are is that. I am the light of the world then, that's what it means. And you can use that as a reminder, because otherwise you might begin to believe that you are a person, and there's nothing else to you except your personal history and a little bit of future. And you could believe that, as our mainstream culture still does, that the universe is purely a chance creation with no intelligence behind it whatsoever, with no purpose. It has come about purely by chance. It means nothing. And you yourself, this is a belief that started with Darwin, you yourself have come about through just chance accumulation of atoms and molecules. And that's a delusion, and it brings you to nihilism. And if we don't get beyond that and realize that although evolution is probably the case, so in that sense Darwin was correct, there is an intelligence that drives the evolutionary process, and that intelligence is the consciousness, is ultimately God. And God is not an entity. It's not a controlling entity. God, people say absurd things like, well, obviously there is no God because there's so much suffering, and if God is omnipotent, and otherwise if he's not omnipotent, then there's no God. But he doesn't end the suffering. He allows the suffering. Maybe he even creates it, who knows. But he doesn't put an end to it, and therefore it means, obviously, there is no God. Because if there were God, he wouldn't allow all this suffering. That's a very limited view of God as a controlling father figure. He's sitting at a control board and pulling all the strings, or he refuses to pull the strings, but he could. But no, God is the life in every life form. God is incarnated in every life form. And is gradually coming more fully into this dimension with your help. And that is this step in human evolution where you can facilitate this, not because ultimately it happens through you. It's always a question of whether you say, well, do I have a choice? Do I have free will? From one perspective you do, from another you don't. That's fine. We don't need to go into that now. All you need to remember is you can live consciously as much as possible. And as a last thing, important to emphasize, even if you never practice any of these manifestation practices, if you could only remember one thing that would change your life, and this one thing is to practice gratitude for whatever it is, gratitude for the breath that you're taking at this moment. Gratitude does not necessarily involve words. It could involve words that go through your mind and say, thank you for this moment, thank you for the breath that I'm... But then that you would need lots of words if you do that. Some people do it. I thank you for this lovely water that's in this glass that I'm going to drink now, and then you can drink it and be thankful. Thank you for the sky, the clouds, Thank you for anything. The carpet, how the light reflects off the table. Thank you. But you don't have to actually say it to be gratitude. You don't need to say it anymore. And then gratitude becomes something else. It's not so much a thank you, because people ask, well, doesn't that imply that you are thanking someone or something? And they say, Buddhists have said to me, or people who don't believe in God, how do I practice gratitude because I don't believe that there's a God? So if I don't talk to God and say thank you, who am I saying thank you to? Well, if you're a Buddhist, well, you could say thank you to the Buddha, but that is not quite right either. Buddha is not a God, although conventionally he's treated like a God. So then the attitude of thankfulness or gratitude really is the giving of attention briefly, and your attention rests upon something and you appreciate its beingness. If it's a man-made thing or a human-made thing, you might even think of the humans that made that thing, and so you appreciate how it came here. You don't even have to, you don't have to think conceptual words to do that. I can look at even the phone. I can look at this, and I can appreciate. I mean, it is a miraculous thing in itself. It's neither good nor bad. It can have all kinds of repercussions. But it is miraculous, there's no doubt about it. It's been human-made. People designed it. And people made it and put it together. And you can appreciate it. So it's not only something that is a means to an end, but it's also something that you appreciate for what it is. And there's always a moment of stillness when you appreciate something. You appreciate its existence. So that is basically still gratitude, but without any words. And that appreciation is extremely important. And occasionally you may still have the words arising in your mind as a kind of affirmation. Thank you for this. Thank you. Or the words may not be there anymore. And the more that means you acknowledge the good in your life. And there's a lot of good. If you listen to what's happening on the media, listen to CNN for 4 hours a day or 5, it's hard after that to acknowledge the good that's around you. So acknowledge the good in your life because it's everywhere. And if you acknowledge the good and appreciate it, you open yourself up to more of it. More good comes into your life when you acknowledge the good. That is a secret that is, I don't know how many people know that. It works always. So if you want to just do that as a general practice in your life, then that would change many things. Continuously acknowledging the good. And now it always requires a moment of no thought. When your attention rests upon something, to acknowledge the good, there needs to be a moment of no thought when your attention, which is consciousness, rests upon something. You can look at it, or you can feel it, or sense it, and then you don't even need the words in your head anymore. Just a moment of just attention. And then you know that it is good without having to formulate the word in your mind. That's a very powerful practice, and you'll be amazed how much you find that's around you, no matter where you are. That is good. Some things will be natural things that are good, the tree, the flower, the blade of grass. Other things will be man-made, human-made things. Humans have made it. It's a miraculous thing. Some objects involve many humans before it gets to you, and they all made it, and it's wonderful. Gratitude. Very powerful manifestation. So you don't need to even think of what do I want and what do I need. Many things will come to you with just the attitude of gratitude, of appreciation. And just see if you can help transforming the otherwise insane online world, internet world. Let's see if you can, if you participate in it at all, and most of you probably do, if you can transform it into something that is helpful for the evolution of consciousness instead of a regressive movement, because a lot of it at the moment is regressive, destructive, toxic. So let your contribution be a conscious one. So the words you formulate when you post something, don't create an absurd, manufactured image of yourself on Facebook. Be honest. Don't live through a mental image, as many people still do. A mental image of me, the righteous one, the morally superior one. And then you make your toxic comments about all the others who are morally inferior to you because they have a different opinion. Very unconscious. So that could be part of your practice too. You change the world by, you might just, who knows, maybe you put occasionally positive affirmations there, whatever it is. Or how your life is changing through the practice of presence. Have some compassion towards others, allow others their opinions. Don't confuse somebody's mental position with who they are. Don't confuse your opinions and viewpoints with who you are. When somebody questions your opinions or viewpoints, don't react as if they had been attacking you. Don't be identified with mental positions. Be the consciousness. I am the light of the world. So our aim is to manifest a more harmonious, more sane life. It begins with your personal sphere, and then it spreads out. And things spread easily these days, much more easily before. They can spread within seconds. So a conscious person can use the media and spread a message of consciousness. However, even if you didn't use the media, it is true that any person that awakens will affect the collective consciousness of humanity to a small degree, and make it easier for others to also awaken. Even if that person never spoke about it, it would still be true. So we have various ways in which consciousness can be disseminated. One is the way it does it naturally, through the underlying collective consciousness of humanity, and then it does it through the new technology too. I wish you well in your practice, and you may want to share with others how it's going. It's helpful to be in touch with others who are also engaged in living more consciously.